having worked for these big companies with huge customer bases and then going to start my own company, it really lies in the fact that you can just start from scratch and you can build what you need for today. And it's going to be a very different experience than what was built 10 or 20 years ago.
Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we get real about what it takes to succeed, whether it's in business, life, or both. I'm talking to game-changing and visionary women who've broken barriers, built empires, and redefined success on their own terms. They'll share their strategies, secrets, and the no BS advice you need to rise to the top. I'm your host, Jennifer Justice, also known as JJ. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I'm Jennifer Justice. Today we have Julie I'm messing up her name already. Julie Bornstein. She's the founder and CEO of Daydream. And you are going to hear all about her amazing new company that every single one of you is going to be using very soon, because it is something that we've all wanted for a very long time. So Julie, thank you so much for being on here and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about Daydream and explain to everybody what it is. So I want to jump in with what it is and then go back into how you got here, because that's always a big, interesting factor in particular for women. So tell us, what is it?
Basically, it's a next generation fashion search engine. So think about ChatGPT, but for fashion shopping. You can ask for anything you want. You can use natural language and you can express an event you're going to or a need you have. And it's just a much more intelligent search engine that helps find all the right products to match your needs. And we work with thousands of brands. So we sort of have access to the whole web. And over time, what we're building is a better understanding of each user. So we can help become sort of like a personal stylist in your pocket.
Right. Okay. So let me ask some obvious questions for people who are like, well, can't I already do that? Can't I Google it? Can't I do that with ChatGPT already?
Yes, you can. And the results suck. And so as we all know, when you're trying to shop on Google, usually the ads are pretty good, but the products below are filled with lots of noise. It doesn't really understand, your taste, your brand preferences. A lot of times the products aren't particularly accurate. There's stuff coming from eBay and stuff coming from Amazon. And it's just a very messy experience. And so if you think about like where you go to shop today, most people have a few websites that they open up and just go to. But it's really hard to kind of search across the web in one place in a way that is tailored to what your sort of preferences are. And so our whole goal is to make this around understanding what your style preferences and your budget preferences. And then no matter what your needs are, you can tell us what they are. And magically, you can find sort of the best products on the web, rank ordered according to what's best for you and what's most interesting and a good fit.
And so that doesn't mean like it's all coming from the same store, right? So if I'm saying I'm going to whatever, LA this weekend and I want an outfit or something, how does that work? It's all AI backed, right?
Yeah. So from the AI side, you can sort of tell us anything you want. You can say, I'm going to LA. It's this kind of event. The temperature is going to be this, or the weather is going to be this. And we can sort of understand and then translate your sort of human requests into search criteria. Then we have partnerships with retailers and brands. And so we work with all the big retailers, Net-a-Porter, Shopbop, Revolve, Nordstrom, many, many more, as well as hundreds of brands directly. And so what we can do is we can sort of look across the assortment of all of these different sites and pull together the things that are sort of most relevant for both your request and for you.
And is this for women only right now, or?
No, it's women's and men's.
And what about kids?
Not kids yet.
I'm like selfishly asking because it's like, okay, they're back to school. Like, how many things do I need to get? And when can I get it all?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Does it also give you like price variation? So it's like if you can get something at Nordstrom and at Bloomingdale's, it'll tell you which one's cheaper, or how does that work?
Yep.
And what about like for styling? Like, is it all based on your preferences, or does it give any kind of input back on what you could potentially look good in?
So today it basically, the sort of styling comes in to where the brands and the retailers are showing how to wear things. Over time, we have a bunch of really interesting ideas around outfitting and how you sort of pair things that we'll be working on, but that's not in the current version of the product.
Okay. So I want to go back to how you got here, and then let's go more into a user experience. So like, how did you get into, having a tech company? I mean, you started in fashion, but wasn't it more like, correct me if I'm wrong, like Nordstrom.com?
Yeah. So my first job out of college in 1992 was for Donna Karan, actually. And I sort of got to see the wholesale side of the business, which was really interesting. And then fast forward a few years later, I did a few different things, and then ended up going to join Nordstrom in the very early days of e-commerce there. And when I saw Amazon launch in 1996, I remember where I was sitting, my brain exploded with all the things you could do with fashion. And so I had been thinking about it for a few years. And then Nordstrom had announced that they were going to launch e-commerce. And I spent about 6 months trying to convince Dan Nordstrom to hire me, and really got to spend 5 years playing around with building e-commerce for Nordstrom. And it was such a gift because Nordstrom's such a beloved brand, carries all sorts of different brands. And we were in the early days really just trying to convince brands who partnered with Nordstrom in the retail store to sell online. And it was, late 90s, early 2000s. And so this was a whole new way of sort of transacting, and learned so much from doing that. And really also learned sort of the limitations around technology at the time. And so what I would say is actually, since that point, I've been sort of chasing technology and trends to make shopping better. And so through my career, I spent 5 years at Nordstrom helping to build Nordstrom.com, which is kind of similar to how it is today. So it hasn't changed that dramatically, actually, which I think is a real opportunity. And then spent a couple of years at Urban Outfitters building e-commerce, and then joined Sephora and was at Sephora for 8 years building e-commerce while the world was changing. So social became a thing, and suddenly it was really important to have videos from YouTube, on the how to apply the makeup on the product page. And community became a thing, and people wanted to ask each other questions, first on Facebook, and then we launched Beauty Talk, and people could ask questions about makeup and what they should, buy and try. And so it's been, I would say then mobile became a thing, and we launched Beauty Insider, the loyalty program at Sephora, and we made everything very multi-channel. So you could see what color foundation is when you walk into the store to buy a new foundation. And just thinking, I think with each of these steps, how technology could be used to make shopping smarter and easier. And that's kind of been my lifelong obsession. And then what happened is I started, I joined first Stitch Fix as a board member, then joined full-time for a couple of years, and really got to work closely with the data science team and think about how you could use algorithms to help make recommendations for fashion. This was already being done for media, books and music and movies. It was harder for fashion. It's not the same. And it comes and goes. And so there's all sorts of interesting, unique aspects to trying to make fashion recommendations that aren't quite as easy as media.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's hard also because it's an experience, right? It's like you want to go and you want to see everything and touch it and try it on. And so, I'm sure it's a little more difficult.
It's true. It's hard to replace in-person shopping for clothing. But it's much more pleasurable ultimately once you find what you like, What's happened in the whole world really around commerce is, we all used to have to go to stores to buy before the internet existed. Now you can go to a store, but you have no guarantee that if you need a dress for a wedding, for example, you're even going to find one. So the web is really the more utility side of shopping. And, I feel like there's still the fun of just exploring, physical stores and finding things you love and buying them. But it tends to be less, mission driven and a little more entertainment now.
Yeah.
And so, I think that we started to play around with lots of interesting things at Stitch Fix, and it really whet my appetite for how you could apply data and recommendations in the fashion world. And so I left Stitch Fix and started my own company called The Yes, which was a pre-Gen AI. So before the LLMs kind of launched at large, it was a recommendation engine for fashion. And we had a lot of fun building that. We learned a ton. And we ended up getting acquired by Pinterest, who was interested in building more commerce-enabled capabilities on their site. And we all went over to Pinterest and spent some time there. And then ChatGPT launched. And, I think all of this had been in the works for many years, but what it really did was it unlocked this whole new way to express what you want. And the web hasn't really allowed for that before this. Keyword search is you need to know exactly what the site calls the product. And if you use that same term, then the product will show up. But being able to just say, I'm going to speak at an event in New York City, and I need to look very sharp and professional. What are some ideas? That hadn't existed on the web. And so, but that is how consumers really think about shopping. And if you are asking someone to help you shop, you will tell them that. And so really what we've built is kind of the first version of talk to us however you want. We're going to be able to understand it, translate it, and show you great suggestions to fill your need.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like a chicken and an egg, right? We find these things where it was we didn't know we needed. And then now it's well, why doesn't this exist?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because shopping in particular, I can't wait until you launch kids, but for them, for things they need, I need an XYZ because now I have a dress up day. They don't really care about what it looks like, but it's, or where they get it from. But I care how much I spend on it. You end up spending a lot of time even on, the internet looking for stuff, in particular, and for ourselves, But this is no small feat. When you came, you were working for all these other companies. I guess, your first foray into working by yourself and building your own company at the Yes, what was that experience like, coming from big companies with, benefits and health insurance and,
Yeah, it was scary actually. And I was pretty old. I was 47 when I started it. So I was very experienced, as kind of a manager and running businesses, hiring people. But what I would say is that going out on your own is it's a very vulnerable feeling. It made me think about writers and singers and people who are putting themselves out there with their, own ideas and creativity. And I feel like it's been a very different experience starting the Yes versus starting Daydream.
In what way?
Well, I think it was scarier the first time. I just felt like I was taking a really big risk. I felt like I had a reputation, for my career in my small, sort of circle of work. And so I really needed to make this thing work. And, if people didn't like it, what was going to happen? And just everything I was doing was new because I'd never started a company from scratch. So I had sat on the board of a startup and I had started a lot of businesses. Each of the companies that I worked for, I was kind of running the startup within the business, but to have that whole corporation behind you, as opposed to sort of being on your own, raising money, convincing people they should fund you, and then making sure you're using their money wisely. So it was very nerve-wracking. And I would say when the product finally, and also I'm not an engineer. And so I have this idea of the product I want to build, but I have to partner with amazing engineers who actually can build software from scratch to create what I had in my mind. And of course, they always add to it and make it so much better. But, I think I remember the moment where we sort of finally were ready to launch the Yes. And I felt like, okay, this product is good enough. I'm proud of it. This is what I wanted it to do. But it took 2 years to build that. Yeah. And, there's a lot of faith that you have to put in the process, and a lot of patience you need to have.
Well, yeah. And then how do you know, who are the right engineers? It's something that you don't know anything about. You almost have to figure out that they're really bad or not right for you in order to know,
Yeah. So I got lucky the first time around. My co-founder at the Yes was someone who had worked in a similar space to what we were building and was recommended to me from one of the VCs that invested in me. And his name was Ahmed Agarwal. And he and I sort of partnered up to build the Yes. And he hired all the technical talent, and he was very technical, and he did a great job. And he built a great product and hired great engineers. And I realized after starting Daydream how lucky I was that that went so well. Because then with Daydream, I think we started with a certain team, and they had a certain skill set. And that skill set was actually really good for building prototypes and figuring out this idea that we had around Daydream. But ultimately, we needed to bring on some different technical skill sets to build something that was scalable. And so
AI, right? Which is not that, it's very old, but the people who know how to build outside of LLMs, it's difficult. Yes.
It is. And, the landscape is changing so quickly that when we started Daydream, there were no experts. It's not like there are people who have built this already. We started maybe 6 months after ChatGPT launched, started playing with it. And so my early partners were awesome. We all did tons of experimentation. We learned a lot in the process. And then, we learned what skill set we needed, what systems we needed to build. And I would say we've actually been through already kind of 3 iterations of the technology as we've learned, played around and tested, and as the technology itself has evolved. But along the way, I met a terrific technical leader who joined us as CTO in January. Her name's Maria Belasova, and she's a woman, which is so rare in technology. And so it's been a real dream because not only is she deeply technical, she actually has a deep search background, and she's also scaled teams. So she's hired engineers. She's great at identifying talent. All of which is really needed in a technical partner, but she's also a shopper. And so she just organically understands what we're trying to build and how to translate that. And it's been really fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That seems one of the most daunting tasks right now is to try to figure out who the right people are, because somebody said to me very recently, it's you shouldn't, any tech company, you shouldn't call it something AI. It just has to be.
Yeah.
It just has to be the technology behind it, right? But to find all those engineers, in particular at a time when you're hearing that, Mark Zuckerberg's paying $100 million for them. And you're wait, or $1 billion for some of them. You know what I mean? You're what?
Well, and I think what's interesting is any company that starts today has the advantage of starting on, in this new system. And any company that existed a few years back, they're having to retrofit and figure it out. And there's no doubt in my mind, everyone I talk to, no matter what they sell, hair care, makeup, they're building connection services for the web, anything, they are all trying to figure out, what should I be doing? Who do I need to hire? How should I be using AI? And, I tell everyone, there is no one right answer. What you want is people who are eager to learn, are paying attention, and are trying new things. And so certainly from an engineering side, there's all these tools that help engineers to code much faster. And you want to hire engineers who are excited about that and who are, interested in learning all the new ways and are reading and sharing and, talking to each other about it. And it's going to be a process for all of us to figure out how to adapt to sort of this technology landscape.
I know, it's a good point. It's people who, maybe that's why Nordstrom.com is still the same. It's how do you retrofit? And then you have to hire a whole new team, spend a bunch of money. Is it worth it? Tariffs. That's
really where I think there's even a chance for a startup, having worked for these big companies with huge customer bases and then going to start my own company. It really lies in the fact that you can just start from scratch and you can build what you need for today. And it's going to be a very different experience than what was built 10 or 20 years ago.
So what was the difference of how long it took you to build the Yes in 2 years in Daydream?
Well, let's see. I would say we got a working prototype and an alpha product up much faster with Daydream. But then I would say our scope and what we're trying to build is actually bigger and harder. And so I would say in the end, it's probably going to be about the same amount of time to get we're still in beta today, but probably in the next 6 months, our product will be quite advanced. And a lot of the things that we're working on will sort of come to life. And I think the product will be much more comprehensive and much a much sort of more technically complex product than what we had built at the Yes. And hopefully, we have a million ideas of what to do once we sort of get the core search engine working magically.
So also in AI, right, and in tech, you have to raise a lot of money. And I read recently that you raised somewhere between 50 and $60 million, right?
I raised $50 million. Yeah.
$50 million. And as a female founder, we know that it's hard to raise 500,000, right? So, I mean, tell us about that process. I know you'd gone through it once already with the Yes, and you said it was easier with Daydream, but were you still like having to talk about it, making people understand even the questions that I just asked, like, can't I already do that?
Yep. So I think, the fundraising experience has always been interesting. It's it's kind of like all or nothing. And, someone becomes interested and then a lot of people are interested. But if you can't get someone interested, it's very hard. I've advised a lot of younger founders, many of whom are women, on fundraising, and everyone's experience is different. And it really depends on a combination of, I would say, the person themselves, the business they're in, the competitive landscape, their experience. And so I've tried to help people who couldn't raise another dollar even after they had a product successful in market. And, then I've had my own experience raising $50 million before I have a product. And so, it's not a one size fits all situation. One thing that was really interesting is when I was starting the Yes, Lightspeed Ventures was really helpful in just kind of bouncing ideas around with me. A lot of the VCs that start to work with founders when they're early on to help them formulate ideas is a really great way to build a relationship for both sides, the founder and the VC. And they invited me to an event with about 10 other female founders. And we went around the room and it was all early stage. And people talked about how much money they raised. And it was between about 300,000 and the next, I think, highest amount was 3 million. And then I had raised 11 million. This was right after my initial raise for the Yes. And when we got to me, I was sort of at the end of the table. Everyone said, oh my God, why'd you raise so much? Like everyone says you want to be really careful and not overraise. Yeah. And what I said was that, I felt like I needed to raise enough to be able to get the product to the next stage successfully to be able to raise the next round. And that a lot of times what I've watched and witnessed, especially with female founders who can be a little more, I would say less aggressive in the way that they think about pricing their business, is that they don't raise enough up front. They have a really interesting idea, but they run out of money before they can sort of prove any kind of traction. And then they're not able to raise again. And so there have been so many amazing ideas over the last 10 years that I've watched come and go. And, some of them may have made it if they had longer runway. And so that was always like a big part of my thinking when, in my own experience with the Yes. And then when I went to
can we pause on that for 1 second? Because it's like, so is telling about your experience, right? And your belief in yourself and your product, because the thing about raising $11 million, if you're not giving away more than 50% of your company, and doing that, right, is a higher valuation. Plus, everyone talks about a down round. You don't want to raise too much. You don't want to go on a down round. So you just believed so much in your product to raise that.
I did. I've been, I've been a very, had a very narrow focus, deep career. And I'm very expert at basically one thing, which is what I do. And so I did feel like I had the confidence, and the belief in what we were building that I knew A, we could do it. And I knew B, customers would want it. I just did. I had that conviction. And I actually think if you don't have that conviction, it's near impossible to raise money because you have to believe so deeply, not just in the idea, but in yourself to be the one to do that idea. And, I think I come from a generation that's like a little less, let's just go start a company. Like no one my generation in their 20s started companies. There was no capital markets for young founders. And so, coming out of
women.
And certainly not women. Yeah. And so, I think that for me, I sort of gained my confidence through my career and through, building very successful businesses for other companies. So, Nordstrom.com became a very successful business. Urban Outfitters became a very successful web business, Sephora. So I had really, had a track record, and was, super hands-on in building all of those businesses. I loved my teams. We worked super closely together. It was like, it really did feel very entrepreneurial. And so, because I had this sort of very unique expertise at this intersection of like e-commerce, tech, and fashion, I had conviction both in myself to do it and also in the idea. And so, but you can't just have conviction in the idea. You have to build a story around it, and you have to prove that you believe there's a big business to be had. Because if you're going to create, sort of, this is how much money I'm going to raise and this is how much money the company is going to be worth, both, tomorrow after I raise my first round, but ultimately, in the long run, you really have to have a vision for the business. And so you have to have more than just an idea around a product that you're going to build, but you have to have a vision for a business. And so for sure, that was a big part of the early days for me at the Yes, was kind of building, what does this business look like? How does it work? How is it going to grow? All of those pieces. And then, in that case, I met Kirsten Green. She knew my career. We had spoken on a panel once together. I reached out to her, and she just has a lot of expertise in the area, and also as a consumer herself, was interested in this product. So she was a great thought partner very early on at the Yes. Once you sort of connect with a VC, you can work together to think about who else do you want to bring in. And
she's iconic,
She is iconic.
Yeah, which is great.
And so fast forward to Daydream. I mean, I think that this project is more ambitious, I would say. I think that we believe that we can kind of change the way people shop for clothes online. When I went to her initially, I went back to Kirsten. She's the first person I went to. I also went to John Callahan, who was one of my other amazing investors from the Yes, and they were both interested in, doing this again. And they, I think, both recognize that I have this very, laser focus on sort of fashion e-commerce, and that the whole world of LLMs and Gen AI are going to transform all aspects of consumer. And so, this is my lane. This is what I want to focus on. And how are we going to use Gen AI to make shopping better in the fashion realm? So they were super interested. We started working on the product, and then Danny Reimer from Index, who I had met a few times, reached out to me. And again, this is sort of Q1 of 2024, just called me and said, I just want to talk about fashion and AI and what's going on with it. And so I said to him, well, I'm actually starting a company in the space. And so then he said, oh, well, let's talk about it. And so we ended up raising even more than we intended. I didn't go out to raise 50, but what I realized is this is a really hard problem. It's going to require a lot of technology to build, which is engineers, and they're not cheap. And it's going to take time to figure out what works. And so the benefit of raising a bigger round is, listen, this thing is either going to work and it's going to be amazing, which I believe it is, or it's not. But if it is, it's going to be worth a lot. And so let's, get the funding up front. Let's take the time we need to really build what we need to build. And it's been such a gift, because it's been harder than I've expected. The technology is definitely changing quickly and very complex. And I feel very lucky that we have the runway to do all the building and experimenting that we're doing to make this product great.
Yeah, that is so fortunate, right? What do you think is the biggest hurdle that you were surprised by?
I think that what's really interesting is so these LLMs launched. So let's just take, ChatGPT, and it has all this intelligence built into it. And so the assumption for those of us who were building applications on top of these models was that, you can just leverage all that intelligence. You don't really need to build in your own sort of intelligence layer. And that was, I think, for a good year after ChatGPT launched, kind of the thinking. And so people are building travel ideas, they're building, music ideas. So lots of different ideas leveraging sort of the intelligence in these LLMs, which are mind-boggling. What it turns out is that to sort of do one general call to an LLM and be able to serve a customer who has very specific needs does not actually work well. It's slow, it's inaccurate, and it is inconsistent. And so what we've realized is, instead of kind of having this one call out to the LLM to help bring back information and then give results, what we need to do is have an ensemble of mini models that really understand different aspects of fashion. So understand silhouette, understand fabric, because we need to get it. You can't just get it sort of right when someone's looking for something. You need to get it just right. And so it's required, I would say, a level of fine tuning these models that will, in the end, I think, create like a real moat for us, because we're getting very expert in this very, specific domain. But it's not that, I think early on, everyone thought, oh, it's pretty easy just to build sort of on top of these models. And the truth is that you still need to do a ton of your own technical work to make it sort of serve the customer the way it needs to.
Which is why it's so much more expensive. Right. Because if somebody tries it once and they don't like it,
you lose
it. It's
them.
going to be hard for them to try it again, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Trust is so important when you're sort of trying a new experience.
Right. I mean, especially, in all this technology and AI. So what is the advice that you would give to like founders who are doing this and, young people that you're talking to now, if they were starting something like this?
Well, I think that, I think starting something in AI, and especially if you're building something for the consumer. So, there's all these models and there's all these B2B companies that are building technology to help companies build. And then there's kind of the whole consumer space and what is the experience going to look like in the future. And I think that, there's two things you need to keep in mind. One is understanding what AI can and can't do and how to leverage it, and how to have a little bit of foresight into what's going to happen, even though it's very hard to predict. People talk about like an agent is going to do everything for you. So you're not going to need to shop. You're just going to need to say to your agent, go get this for me, and it will suddenly appear.
Right.
That works for some things. It's not going to work for fashion. You still want to weigh in and you still care about the visual. Maybe if you're like replacing your, dish soap, you can do that. But
right. It has to take a picture of you too. You have to know who you are. Like my hair is super blonde because of the summer, in January, I'm not going to be tan and my hair, you know what I mean? It's going to be different. So
there's so many dimensions to us that we are going to want to be able to share so that the results are good and smart and better. So I would say like one is just, really thinking about how technology can do different things. And then I think the other is just kind of thinking sort of first principles about I'm a consumer. What's a pain in my butt and what is going to make my life easier and how do I use technology to solve it? So, for me, it's always been what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And then how does technology help do that? And I think that, idea as a founder, especially for a consumer business of like, what is a problem I want to solve or what is some solution, I think that still is the right place to start. And then the truth is the technology that you use today is different. You can prototype ideas to validate the ideas much faster today. And so, that's one of the biggest changes with technology is like even non-coders can sort of create apps using some of the tools out there and start to
create ideas. Vibe coding on Claude yesterday.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, but, I think no one should be mistaken to say like anyone can build kind of an app overnight on Claude. That is not build a business. And so, I think that it's going to be interesting to see there's lots of ideas out there. What actually, sticks and becomes a new way to get people to do things will be really interesting.
Well, you're a two-time founder in technology with fashion and really started in technology with fashion. So, if you're saying it's hard, right? And if it takes a shit ton of money, it's going to take a shit ton of money. Yes. This is why, people are like, oh, I'm raising, money. And there's a woman who raised like $1 billion or something from OpenAI to start a company. I was like reading about recently. I was like, okay, this is what we're dealing with now. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the tech infrastructure side, the dollars are insane.
Yeah.
What's being raised. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good to know, better to know than not, right? Go in open-eyed. So let's go back to Daydream itself. Let's talk about the whole user experience in it, so it's in beta right now. So can anybody sign up?
Yeah. Anyone can use the product today. You can also give us feedback, which we love. We get a lot of feedback. We know most of the issues. We are about to actually replace our sort of underlying system with a new search system that we've built from scratch. And once we do that, we are will sort of be rapidly refining the experience. So I would say today you can go right now, you can search for a dress for a wedding in Italy. You can get lots of good suggestions. You also can do one of the most fun sort of capabilities is you can say, oh, I like this product, but it's like too low cut, or I don't want it in floral, or I want it short sleeves. And so we have this notion of a pivot where, part of what we've seen as shoppers is sometimes it's hard to describe exactly what you're looking for, but when you see it, you start to have an idea around it. And so,
yeah. One of the things that like, I always need to wear a bra. And so it's like, what can I do? What can I wear under it? Like, that's the other part. Like, it has that capabilities, I'm hoping.
Yes, you can say like, I need to wear a bra. So show me some stuff that works well with a bra. Absolutely. And, so we know not to show you strapless and, or if you want to wear a strapless bra, we may ask you.
Right.
And
will
so
it tell you what kind of stuff you wear under it too? Like if it's a Skims or something like that?
We're not doing that yet. That is sort of tied to, we have this whole sort of concept around building the whole outfit, which I mentioned at the beginning is sort of coming in our future. And so I do think ultimately, yes, we want to help you get dressed head to toe. We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for that one. Okay. So then you log on, you give them the information. How does it work exactly?
Yeah, you share a little bit of information about yourself. So you tell us brands that you like, price points, sizes. So we get some basic information up front. Brands are really telling because what we've ended up doing is building this very comprehensive brand map. And so we know the relationships between brands to one another. So if you like this intersection of like 5 brands, that tells us something kind of the same way like Spotify does around music choice. And so we are using that not just to suggest those brands' products, but also to help find you other products. And so what we've seen is a lot of people love the discovery part. So they'll see brands that they didn't even know about. And that's been a really popular aspect of the shopping experience. And then, we'll suggest to you, you can save the things that you like. Once you can create a collection. So if you're looking for a dress for a wedding in Italy, you can save a bunch of dresses. Then we'll kind of like rerun the model and we'll show you based on the things you've saved. Here are a whole bunch of additional things that are sort of in the same vein. So it's really just helping you hone in on sort of what you're looking for. You can share a product or a collection with a friend and you can say, I'm debating between these. What do you think? And then when you're ready to buy, you click out and you buy it on the site. So it's super easy. We don't interfere with the sort of retailer or brand.
Right. So you're not like drop shipping yourself. It just goes and clicks straight out. You can buy the product, etc. Like it is on Instagram, which makes it super easy.
Yeah. But easier.
But easier. Yes, exactly. But this is amazing. And so you are in beta. People can look it up. And where do they find it?
Daydream.ing.
.ing?
Yep. So
like Daydream.
Some other conversation I'll tell you about the woman who owns Daydream.com, but she's very attached to it. She didn't want to sell it to us. So we're Daydream.ing. And we're also launching an app in October. So
amazing. And so when is the new underlying search capabilities launching?
So that's going to launch in October. And
this will be out around that time. So
exactly.
If you're listening, check it out. Well, check it out anyway.
Yeah, it works pretty well today, I have to say, but there's a lot more coming.
Yeah, amazing. This is so incredible. I love to hear about women raising shit tons of money in VC-backed companies that are super just confident about, what they're doing and working with our mutual friendly screen, of course, who's amazing. I've known for like 10 years now. We were on that Marie Claire power trip together. That's where we met.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, this was awesome, Julia. And obviously you're running this massive company, so we got to let you go. But I do ask one question at the end of every single episode. And that is, what is the worst advice you've ever received?
The worst advice I received was, I don't know if this falls exactly into that, but an investor who I had known for many years, when I was thinking about starting the Yes, told me that I was too old to start a company.
And he didn't see the data that said that women over like 45 produce bigger returns when they start their own company?
I guess not. He's a venture investor. He's invested in a lot of young people, and he like literally almost talked me out of it. And then I realized actually the amount of experience I have, the pattern recognition, and kind of the energy I have, and the fact that my kids are now grown up, so I can actually like put all my dedication to this startup. All of those things make it, I think, the perfect time to start a company. But he sort of had this feeling like you have to both be a young person to understand sort of like the zeitgeist and the technology, and to like, not care enough to put everything into it. And I realized that he was wrong.
Yeah. Well, and also, is it like that whole, founder mentality, you have to work 27 out of 24 hours a day, It's like, yep. Do you really, if you know a lot more, do you really have to work as much?
Right. And the truth is, like, for anyone who's a founder, you kind of work all the time anyway. So, it's just a constant part of your life. And I feel like I probably work smarter than a 27-year-old, but I also have so many advantages of just having seen things before.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on this episode. I'm sure everybody is going to be a power user of Daydream. And to everyone listening, thank you to listening to this episode of Taking Care of a Lady Business. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice. Thanks to MedJet for supporting the Lady Business podcast. If you're hospitalized or your security is threatened while traveling, they can get you home. I'm a MedJet member and have been for years. Everyone who travels should be. Enroll before your next trip at medjet.com. Thanks for tuning in to Taking Care of Lady Business. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review. And also share this episode with a friend who needs that extra push to own their success. If you want more strategy stories and exclusive content, follow us on TikTok at Taking Care of Lady Business, on Instagram at thejustice.dept and Jennifer Justice L, or visit our website at thejusticedept.com. Taking Care of Lady Business is a production of Lady Business LLC.